Welcome to my channel. My name is Jane. I'm preparing this video series on parenthood and what you should know. Lately I've seen a few talks on parenthood and I get the sense that many women are quite torn about becoming moms and nobody really gives you any information and guidance. So I thought I'd make this video series so that you can give some thought to some things before deciding to become a parent. Just for information purposes, I am a mom. So the thing is, you're female, you're born with a womb, and somewhere there's the thought that you should be giving birth. But the thing is, you're not designed to just be a mom because you have a womb. Men, of course, will tell you it's your duty. That's what you were designed for. Believe me, I've had men tell me this. But you actually need to override that message because being a parent isn't for everyone. And if you are ambivalent or you don't feel you can do it, you should not become a parent. At some age, of course, it's different for everyone. People will start asking when you're getting married. Usually, after you get married, the pressure is on for kids. The pressure is relentless, as you might know. People close to you might be quite rude and start imposing their desires on you. Grandparents will push for grandchildren that they have no intention of raising, and friends may even start raising an eyebrow if you don't have kids. The pressure can even come from your spouse. Spouse who promises you the world if only you birth these offspring. The pressure is relentless from strangers and from family, and you sometimes feel you should just relent. But should you? If ever there was proof that gender equality is still alive and well in the world, it's the pressure on women in their 30s to have children. If you're thinking about being a mom, I feel you should be armed with information that no one close to you is really going to arm you with. Trust me, there's usually dead silence. What you really need to know about becoming a parent is included in this presentation. I'm going to lay it all out there for you, so buckle in and let's begin. What does your life vision look like? Remember, your life is uniquely yours. So don't be afraid to live a life that's different to what other people have chosen. Are you making the decision for yourself or someone else? The husband and the babies are the expectation of what's supposed to happen when you reach a certain point. But is that whole package right for you? People always say we're here to procreate, but there are too many kids, abandoned, abused, and neglected. So some of us prefer to work on making the world a better place and just being happy rather than pushing out babies. And there's really nothing wrong with that. What I'm trying to say is make the choice that's right for you. I've paraphrased Tracy Ellis Ross in this slide. She's an actress and she's perfectly content living life as a single woman without kids. She had an interview with Marie Claire and she opened up about the societal pressures placed on women to get married and have children. When asked by Marie Claire if she once dreamed of a life with a large family, she said, "How could you not? Our society spoon-feeds it to you. I used to put myself to sleep dreaming of my wedding." And I would still love all of that. But what am I going to do? Sit around waiting? Shut up. I've got so many things to do. Ross also made some statements when she covered for the May 2020 issue of Porter. I wish I had known there were other choices, not just about how I could be living, but how I could feel about the way my life was, she's told the publication. I was raised by society to dream of my wedding, but I wish I had been dreaming of my life. The pressure on women is enormous. We are almost programmed from the time we get our first dolls for being moms and wives, but deep inside I think many of us know we aren't right for the status quo. I was really one of these women that didn't really fit the mold. I knew I didn't really want the husband, and I never imagined being married, and as for kids, there was no deep driving maternal desire to be a mom. My reason for not wanting a husband was more along the lines of I just saw how much a woman had to do in a marriage and how little a man contributed, and I didn't really want to be a caretaker. I wanted to have a partner, and I didn't feel that that was evident in many marriages that I saw. So I suppose somewhere along the line, I sort of opted out of getting married. And being a mom, I never really had any deep desire to be a mom. In fact, at one point in time, I thought I couldn't have kids. So I became a mom, but not by design, more by design of the universe. That's another story for another video. And I knew after I had my one child, and when things were a little difficult when she was around 9 or 10, that I was panicked at the thought of having any more, which is how I knew that being a mom again was probably not for me. You don't want to be getting panicked when you're thinking about having a baby. It's important to evaluate your circumstances. Are you financially and emotionally stable? Because if you aren't, becoming a mom isn't a smart choice. Kids need and deserve stability. If you can't provide that, then don't have kids until you can. And the pressure on you will be enormous. People will try to push their agenda on you. Just don't cave in. I'm sure some of you listening to this video series have even been subjected to your life will be enriched if you have a child. You will never know real love unless you give birth. Don't you want to leave a legacy? Who will take care of you when you're older? You aren't getting any younger. Know this, the people that are pressuring you likely won't be there to babysit when you're feeling overwhelmed. They won't be there to help you with late night feeds. They won't be there to help you with the finances, but they are all there telling you what you should be doing with your body. There's something wrong with this picture. Why are these people putting pressure on you to fulfill their fantasies of the lives they wanted to live? It's your life and your body and your choice, and the responsibilities and the bills are going to be all yours. So let's move on to what to consider before having kids. So having kids isn't just a hit and a miss affair, and in families where it is, the kids always suffer. So it would be wise to sit down and understand a few facts about having children before you make the decision. First of all, about your husband and family members. Your husband may promise you the world. He'll help with everything. You won't have to do things alone. But the fact is, he likely won't mean a word of it. Even if he helps to start, the whole responsibility usually falls on the woman. And soon after the baby arrives, it will end up being your primary responsibility. If other people do babysit once in a while, they get to hand that child back. And guess what? All the responsibility is yours. Your mom isn't carrying or giving birth or financially raising a child in a world where babies cost small fortunes to raise. So respectfully, if your mom's putting pressure on you to have kids, tell her to butt out if she's pressuring you. This applies to in-laws too. At the end of the day, you will be the one responsible for that human until the day you die. And then your body. Childbirth is hectic. It's painful, it's long, and there can be complications. Don't let anyone tell you differently. In the past, women have died giving birth. After the birth, you'll be shattered, but the baby will wake you up for regular feeds. You're likely to be sleep deprived for at least a month, maybe more. Your body won't bounce back. You'll be left with stretched skin and scars, and your vaginal muscles will never be the same again. Pregnancy permanently changes the body, and most of the damage isn't always fixable. So say goodbye to your pre-pregnancy body. The larger you carry, the more stretching of the skin there'll be, and you will land up with bad stretch marks. Parenting is, in essence, about sacrifice. You're going to land up sacrificing a few things. Your hobbies, your body, your sleep, your freedom of movement, sometimes your career aspirations, sometimes your friends, sometimes your sanity if you battle with mental health, your finances, and your peace of mind. If you know you will resent or be overwhelmed by any of the sacrifices I've just mentioned, I would not recommend parenting. I've included some quotes here. One is, every child is born with two parents, but what's sad is oftentimes only one of them makes all the sacrifices. And we know that that usually lands up being the mom, while the dad really doesn't help very much. The natural state of motherhood is unselfishness. When you become a mother, you are no longer the center of your own universe. You relinquish that position to your children. The side of parenting no one really speaks about. Most people won't confess to struggling with being a parent because they feel they'll be judged. So most people just pretend everything is fine. The fact is that if you're struggling with mental health, parenting makes it worse. If you're someone who likes your freedom and time alone, then you'll lose that when you become a parent. The fact is, you aren't going to hear the truth from your family or friends. No one is going to tell you if they are regretful and miserable, so don't expect them to. That's too much truth for even them. I actually made this video to try and arm you with some information to help you in making the decision. So these are some quotes from some people, and I'm going to just read through them. I'm not a good mother. I care about them, but I don't know how to raise them. They're raising themselves while I cry beside them. Generational trauma, a biological father who's an insane pedophile. I was too young and groomed. I traumatized my kids with my ignorance. I can help trying to learn, grow, and help them, but the damage is done. I wish I could go back and fix myself so I could help them, but I can't. I'll always support them. When they want to yell at me in 10 years for everything and shut me out, I'll get it. Because, yeah, fuck man, I was too young and I didn't know enough. I chose their sperm contributions badly. I have two kids. Well, now they're legally adults, but mentally they're still 2 years old. They're autistic, developmentally delayed, and have mental disorders to boot. I've gotten zero help from the state, and trying to navigate this world is a nightmare. It doesn't help that the whole world is severely unprepared for an aging population, much less an aging disabled population. I regretted having them the second I found out they wouldn't be able to care for themselves. I'm so scared for the day that I will have to put them in a home of some sort because the likelihood of being sexually abused goes up 7 times. They won't understand why they can't be at home, much less what is happening to them. None of us have any sort of life or friends. It's horrible. When my daughter turned 17 and stopped speaking to me, I regretted putting her first my entire life. I think if I was wealthy that she'd pretend to care about me now, but I'm not, so I'm worthless to her. She's in her early 20s now, and I derailed my entire life for her. Her dad wanted to abort her, and I made her entire life possible. I thought I made it as good as I could, but whatever it was she needed was not something I could give. It isn't her fault, but her behavior now is. I don't feel like I even got a chance with her. I cope by thinking about her in the past tense and making peace with her being gone. I have a stepkid and son who still visit and love me, so I guess that's more than most people get. I value them so much and try to focus on them. Some of those things just show that motherhood isn't always perfect, and that's something you should be aware of. I'm not saying it's going to happen to you. I'm just saying that you need to be prepared for the eventuality of things not always being 100% perfect when you're a mom. What made me regret it? Finding out that everything our society tells women about pregnancy, childbirth, and the challenges of raising kids is either an outright lie or totally glossed over so as not to discourage women from having children. I was shocked to find out how many people were also knowingly complicit. Doctors, nurses, older women around me, religious people, and men. Shh! Don't tell them, they might change their mind. Every step of the way is difficult, or has some heavy challenges associated with it. There are no full disclosures to potential parents, even though those same parents' experience and ability to adapt and cope will directly affect the child. When I reached out to others for advice, the typical response was, "Welcome to my world." What, really? You say you love me, but you didn't actually warn me how much damage my body and my life would take. I'm struggling constantly with anxiety and stress from work spilling over into my few hours at home and making us all miserable. My boys are at the age where they are ruining everything in the house I rent. It's going to cost me thousands to repair it before we move. We don't struggle for money, but only because I work constantly. I put way too much responsibility on my oldest daughter despite having a full-time nanny. I feel like I'm losing control of everything and a deep depression is setting in. I'm constantly fighting thoughts of just giving up. As much as I don't like admitting this, I regret having my second child. She's currently 9 months old and I love her little face. She can be the cutest. But I was free. My oldest is a 15-year-old independent teen, so I got to the point where I didn't have much to do. We were slowly transitioning to a more friend-like relationship. Now I'm starting back at the beginning, and I'm all alone again because my partner works so much. There's not a day that goes by where I don't say, I hate my life at least once. The really sucky part is that I'm about to go back to work. On top of being the primary caregiver and homemaker, I'm going to work 40 hours a week. I'm also 42, so I'll be in my 50s before this one is truly independent. I'm trapped and there's nothing I can do but grin, bear it, and hope I don't have a nervous breakdown. You can see that some women are really having a difficult time with being parents. Obviously, this is not representative of everybody, ladies. Some people have easy kids and have easy lives, and so all parenting isn't difficult, but you never know what you're going to get, and I think you should be prepared. Okay, so let's go on to pre-baby birthing costs now. You should know that giving birth is expensive. You do all the work really, but the clinics and hospitals are standing by to profit. The most expensive places to give birth are the US and Japan, while Canada, Russia, South America, and South Africa are the least expensive. According to Forbes, the USA has very high childbirth rates. Hospitals charge just over $32,000 for a standard delivery and more than $51,000 for a C-section. Even though insurance providers typically cover most of that, new families are usually left with a bill that can add up to thousands of dollars. By comparison, a standard delivery in the Netherlands only averages 3.6, with a C-section working out at 5,000, and they are typically completely covered by insurance providers. Unfortunately, many families land up going into debt just to cover the birthing costs, which is not an ideal situation and is actually quite disgusting of the service providers charging so much money for something where they don't really get involved. I really think this needs to be looked at, and service providers need to reduce these birthing costs. After all, most of the time, moms are just using a bed, and I really think that this needs to be looked at. On the right of this slide, you'll see a table showing some of the birthing costs. Gives you a bit of a comparative. Let's talk a little bit about the USA, because we always think of it as a first world country. So the USA ranks poorly on the survival of moms, and there's no sick leave policy. The US is one of the most dangerous developed nations on the planet for childbirth, with around 700 mothers dying every year, while the infant mortality rate is also higher than other developed countries. Even when things go well and families are landed with a hefty bill, mothers and fathers are not covered by any national leave paid policy. Even though several states have moved to introduce measures guaranteeing some form of paid family leave policy, the harsh reality is that 1 in 4 US women return to work just 2 weeks after childbirth. The USA ranks low on many metrics when it comes to birth benefits and even the safety of children. To be honest, the USA is one country I wouldn't want to raise my kids in, and I've always wondered why people flock to the USA, because it scores really low on taking care of women and families, and it doesn't really do a good job of taking care of parents. Maternity leave. The US remains light years behind in maternity leave. The USA has obviously been hyped as the best country to live in, but the truth is it's behind on so many metrics that it's in fact one of the worst countries to live. And there are many reasons, which I will discuss in some of my other presentations. From a birth perspective, you can see how much paid parental leave moms get in various countries. In the US, you get none. In Australia, you get 8. In the UK, 12. And you can see the various different countries listed there. The EE is the best with 82 days leave, and Germany is not ranking too badly. They're either at 43. Canada is also not doing too badly at 26. But the first world countries are doing shockingly at giving maternity leave. They really are light years behind in terms of actually looking after young moms, and they wonder why people don't want to have kids. Well, they should look at their shocking maternity leave policies and the discrimination women face when they have kids. Maybe that will be a pointer. It seems like quite a number of people regretted having kids, and these are the people with normal kids. But what happens if you have a child that's mentally or physically challenged? This is much harder. A family member of mine has a son. During birth, the child was deprived of oxygen, which caused brain damage. The boy is functional, but clearly has challenges due to the damage to his brain. This was something very unexpected, and this has changed his whole life in so many ways. I'm sure his dad must worry about him and worry about what happens when he's no longer around to take care of his son. Post-baby things to consider. You may be a couple, but let's face reality. The mom lands up doing most of the work and the dads do the bare minimum. That child is more your responsibility than his and will always be because you gave birth to it. What that means is be prepared to raise the baby alone if things don't work out with the father, because there's no guarantee that he'll stay around. When your child is ill, you'll be the one taking time off work to take care of the child. This will likely impact your career progression and pay increases. You will be forced to choose between career and motherhood, and most parents will never be able to comfortably retire due to the amount of money it takes to raise children. That's due to the insane costs associated with raising kids these days, and governments wonder, again, why people aren't having kids. For most women, their body will be changed permanently from childbirth, and there's also a risk to giving birth. Sarah Greer says, pregnancy and childbirth are major global killers of women aged 15 to 45. In the US, we have one of the worst maternal mortality and maternal morbidity rates in the developed world. 1 in 3 women here will need major abdominal surgery to give birth. 1 in 4 will develop postpartum depression. 1 in 10 will have a complication that will permanently compromise health. All have their bodies changed in the process, and even in the modern age in a wealthier developed nation, many of us will either die or nearly die. I went into liver failure instead of labor and nearly bled out due to HELLP syndrome during my emergency C-section. My health is damaged for good from childbirth. The risk is why it's so reprehensible to try and force women to be pregnant and give birth without their express consent. Many women suffer from postnatal depression. Most new moms experience postpartum baby blues after childbirth, which commonly include mood swings, crying spells, anxiety, and difficulty sleeping. Baby blues typically begin with the first 2 to 3 days after delivery and may last for up to 2 weeks. But some new moms experience a more severe, long-lasting form of depression known as postpartum depression. Rarely, an extreme mood disorder called postpartum psychosis may also develop after childbirth. Babies don't always sleep through. My daughter was awake every half an hour for the first few weeks because my breast milk wasn't sufficient for her, and I can tell you I was exhausted until I switched her to the bottle. I understand how bad sleep deprivation was, and it wasn't her fault, but I was severely sleep deprived. And this is one of the things you might face when you become a new mom. You may suffer physically after birth. I had an episiotomy which became infected, and it was really sore. So, you might suffer complications like I did. You might also resent having a baby attached to you all the time. If they aren't breastfeeding, they need changing, or they want to be held, your whole life lands up revolving around the baby and you rarely have any free time. If you're used to having agency over your body and your time, that can be a really difficult thing to adapt to. You also won't be able to wear anything nice for a while because babies usually bring up all over you when you're burping them. So expect to wear old frumpy clothes for quite a while, because you're just going to realize you can't really wear anything reasonably decent. You have another person to take care of. This means extra costs, nappies, formula, medical aid, school fees. Children cost money from the time they're born and for a very long time afterwards. So you're going to need to budget. Let's look at childcare costs. At some stage, you may be forced to go back to work because most families, let's face it, need both parents to work. It's at this stage that you need to factor childcare into your budget. You may be able to afford to hire a nanny if you're wealthy, otherwise you're going to have to send them to a place where they can be taken care of. The table on the right shows you the percentage of monthly earnings parents spend on childcare across the world. You can see how interesting it is. The table is quite shocking in some instances when you see how high a percentage of their take-home pay parents are spending on childcare expenses. In the UK, it's 23.8%. In Switzerland, it's 20%. In Greece, it's 21%. In the Netherlands, it's 28%. Costa Rica 21%, Colombia 25%, and Chile 29%. Iceland, Norway, Sweden, very low costs, and they have very good childcare facilities there as well. And overall, I think the life satisfaction there is higher. That's because they've learned how to support parents and support people that the rest of the countries haven't learned. Here is a table of different countries and monthly cost of childcare and the average monthly salary and the percentage of earnings spent on childcare. Like I said, this is quite shocking. Turkey, they spend 55% of their earnings on childcare. It's absolutely shocking. Australia is quite high, 29%. Luxembourg at 34%. The Netherlands at 56%. It's ridiculous. How can anyone afford to have children when the expenditure is so expensive, so high? It's ridiculous. School fees. As kids move out of the baby stage, you'll be looking at school fees. Statista has provided information on school fees for a few countries worldwide, included in the table on the right. You can see how high the fees are in the UK and the United States compared to other countries which are much lower. Germany is quite low. Yeah, it's quite prohibitive, the high school fees. Then, if your child wants to study for a degree after they leave school, that's going to cost extra. So you should start saving early for tertiary education if you're smart. If you live in the USA, tertiary education is very expensive. The United States overall, I don't know, just ranks the worst out of all the countries in terms of everything, actually, in terms of birthing fees, hospital fees, mortality, high tuition. It really doesn't rank very well on the matrix. Canada's also fairly high, and so is Australia. So what else should you know before you decide to have kids? First of all, kids are not mini-me's. They're individuals with their own challenges and aspirations. They're going to be difficult, throw tantrums, act out, tell you that they hate you, and be uncooperative. They're individuals. If you have kids expecting robots, don't have kids, because kids aren't always easy. When you have kids, there can be birth complications. As I mentioned, a family member of mine has a brain damaged son who was deprived of oxygen during birth. So birth isn't always easy. Kids get sick, they have issues, they require extra lessons, they have emotions, and they aren't just things that you can ignore or manipulate. Kids have their own dreams and ideas that might not coincide with yours. They aren't going to live their lives based on your ideas for them. Parenthood isn't postcard perfect. If you think your kids will be perfect and well behaved all their lives, you might very well be deluded. Life is not a postcard. So if you watch movies about happy families, remember they were movies. Your kids may be different. Kids throw tantrums. They don't always listen. They don't always do as they're told. When you have kids, you can't just spontaneously go out. You need to get babysitters, and if you don't and you take them, you have to take prams and baby bags and nappies and all the peripherals. You have to go out according to nap times. Your whole routine changes. Another thing is birth is really hard on the body, and there can be complications. Preparing yourself by knowing what could happen means you won't panic. The most dangerous complications during birth are uterine rupture. A uterine rupture is an uncommon pregnancy where the wall of the uterus suddenly tears open. With a severe ruptured uterus, the tear goes through all the layers of the uterus wall and leaves a hole through which the baby can actually come out. Uterine rupture is an extremely dangerous event that may have significant consequences for mom and baby. It does occur in less than 1% of pregnancies, making it one of the least common pregnancy complications. It can occur at the site of scar line from a prior C-section. The increased risk of this kind of situation is the primary reason why attempting a vaginal delivery after a C-section is considered high risk. Uterine rupture most often occurs during labor, but it can also occur during pregnancy. When uterine rupture occurs during labor and delivery, there's an extremely short window of time for doctors to respond to avoid injury to the baby. This means there's no time to perform an ultrasound or any other diagnostics. Uterine rupture has to be diagnosed quickly based on clinical symptoms alone. Ultrasound imaging does have some applications in evaluating the likelihood that scar tissue from a C-section will result in uterine rupture. Number 2, shoulder dystocia. It's an emergency event that can suddenly occur during vaginal delivery in which the baby's shoulder becomes stuck while entering the birth canal, usually on the mother's pelvis bone. The occurrence of shoulder dystocia during childbirth presents an urgent danger to the baby's well-being. When the baby becomes stuck in the birth canal, oxygen deprivation creates the risk of brain injury or even death if the situation isn't quickly overcome. Shoulder dystocia requires doctors to act quickly to dislodge the baby to avoid a hypoxic injury. There are a number of maneuvers that are usually employed to free the stuck shoulder. What makes shoulder dystocia particularly dangerous for the baby is that it tends to be a double-edged sword. The response to shoulder dystocia is often just as hazardous for the baby as the condition itself. In their rush to free the baby's shoulders, doctors and nurses in the delivery room often use too much lateral traction or force. They pull, push, and twist too hard and too fast and end up causing physical injury to the baby. Then there's umbilical cord prolapse. The umbilical cord is the critical lifeline connecting baby and mom. In a normal childbirth, the baby goes through the birth canal first and is followed by the umbilical cord and the placenta. Prolapse occurs when the umbilical cord drops down in the cervical opening and ends up in the front of the baby as it enters the birth canal. This is dangerous because as the baby's head pushes down, it will compress the cord against the pelvis or birth canal walls. This pinching or compression of the cord can restrict or cut off the baby's oxygen. The cord gets more and more compressed as the mother's labor contractions continue pushing the baby down. Compression of a prolapsed umbilical cord mandates the immediate delivery of a baby to avoid birth asphyxia. One reason umbilical cord prolapse is so dangerous is that it's one of the few events that can completely cut off oxygen to the baby, as opposed to simply restricting or decreasing it. That's why the perinatal mortality rate for cord prolapse can be as high as 50%. Fortunately, UCP is a very rare occurrence, reported in less than half of a percent of all deliveries. This low occurrence rate is why it only ranks 3rd on our list. Cerebral palsy. Cerebral palsy is another thing that can be caused by oxygen deprivation during childbirth. It's a disability in which the brain is damaged and not able to properly control body and muscle movement. It usually occurs during childbirth when the supply of oxygen to the baby's brain is temporarily interrupted. It's the most common type of serious birth injury and is the subject of many medical malpractice lawsuits. Cerebral palsy can also be caused by the brain not developing while in the womb. There's a bit of information about cerebral palsy in this video. I have a family member who has suffered from cerebral palsy, and it was very interesting for me to read when I was researching for this video about how this is caused or could potentially be caused. So here are some more pregnancy and birth complications. Labor that doesn't progress, where the contractions weaken. Perineal tears. Sometimes these tears heal on their own. If a tear is more serious, or the woman has had an episiotomy, then you'll be stitched up. I had an episiotomy, and by the time I had the episiotomy, my anesthetic had worn off, so I could feel them stitching me up. It was lovely. So, like I said, birth doesn't always go according to plan. You just have to be prepared. My anesthetic started wearing off towards the end of my pregnancy. I only had the anesthetic late in the afternoon, towards the middle of my labor. And yeah, in any event, like I said, birth doesn't always go postcard perfect. Abnormal heart rate of the baby. An abnormal heart rate during labor does not mean that there's a problem. A healthcare provider will ask the woman to switch positions to help the infant to get more blood flow. Water breaking early. Labor usually starts on its own within 24 hours of a woman's water breaking. If not, and the pregnancy is at near term, the provider will likely induce labor. If the water breaks before 34 weeks of pregnancy, the woman will be monitored in a hospital. Then there's perinatal asphyxia. This is when the fetus doesn't get enough oxygen, which is, as you know, not a good thing because it can cause brain damage. Shoulder dystocia, I've spoken about in my previous slide. And excessive bleeding. If delivery results in tears to the uterus, or if the uterus doesn't contract to deliver the placenta, heavy bleeding can result. Worldwide, such bleeding is a leading cause of mums dying. NICHD has supported studies to investigate the use of misoprostol to reduce bleeding. I've shown you a picture of a vacuum-assisted delivery. I think a vacuum-assisted delivery is better than a forceps. When I was giving birth, they wanted to use a forceps, and I said absolutely not. I think forceps can damage the baby's head, and because a baby's because a baby's skull is still soft and doesn't set properly until a while after the birth, the last thing I would advise is using a forceps. Fortunately, medicine is more advanced than it used to be, but if you're on the fence about birth and motherhood, don't allow yourself to be pushed into it. Don't do it because your husband or boyfriend wants kids, because partners can leave and you'll be the one looking after the baby. Don't do it because your mom and mother-in-law want a grandchild, because they're not giving birth or paying the bills or sacrificing their lives.